My name is Blythe Irving, and I am 76 years old. I've seen a lot in my years, ups and downs, losses and gains. I'm not the kind of old lady who complains about aching joints and forgetting where she put her glasses. Not very often, anyway. Right now, I'm sitting on the veranda of my house in Saline, the town where I've lived most of my life, watching a neighbor boy try to tame his bicycle. It's funny to watch him desperately balancing, barely hanging on to two wheels. Reminds me of Madison as a kid, just as stubborn. The only difference is that this child has pure joy on her face, whereas my daughter, even at 8, was perpetually disgruntled. The house across the street is for sale. Third time in 5 years. People move to Salina with high hopes and then realize that small town isn't just about charming streets and friendly neighbors. It's also endless gossip and a life where everyone is in each other's faces. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I stayed because I was used to a quiet life, and Orville always said that our home is our fortress, and there's no need to look for happiness elsewhere. Orville. It'll soon be 7 years since he's been gone. Sometimes I think I can hear him fiddling in the garage or humming his old songs while strumming his guitar. He had terrible hearing, but that never stopped him from singing at the top of his voice. Music isn't about the right notes, Blighty. It's about the right feelings, he'd say. And I loved him for that endless ability to find joy in the little things. We lived together for 48 years. We met as students. I was studying literature, and he worked in the print shop of the university newspaper. Orville was in love with the printing process. For him, it was not just a job, but a real art. He could talk for hours about fonts, colors, and paper textures. Later, when we married, he set up a small workshop at home where he created amazing things, from greeting cards to decorative bills for the local drama club's theater productions. "See this bill, Blighty?" he'd say, showing me his creations. "It's almost real, but there are little details that make it different from the original." He taught me to notice those details and then to create them myself. It was our little hobby, our secret. "Just in case," he winked. "You never know when knowing how to tell a fake from an original will come in handy." The old fool. I miss him so much. From the veranda, I can see the silver sedan slowly creeping down the street, new shiny, like it's fresh out of the showroom. I sigh. Lloyd always liked to impress. The car pulls up in front of my house, and two people get out, my only daughter Madison and her husband, Lloyd Thorndike. Madison inherited my red hair, but otherwise took after her father. The same broad shoulders and large features. She makes Lloyd look puny, despite his expensive suit and well-groomed beard. Oh, those two always wear me out. And I know what they're here for. It's always the same. "Mom," Madison smiles as she walks up on the porch. "Are you outside all day again? Didn't Dr. Hedges tell you to take care of your health?" "Hello, dear," I answer, not moving from my seat. "Hello, Lloyd. What a surprise to see you here." Lloyd nods, but I can tell by the look on his face that he's anxious to get down to business. "You look terrific, Blythe," he says, flashing his trademark smile, the one he uses to sell business training to gullible clients. "Don't be flattered, Lloyd. At my age, it sounds like mockery." Madison rolls her eyes. "Oh, here we go. We just got here and you're already being negative." I stare at her in silence. Every year she looks more and more like the resentful teenage girl she once was. Only the wrinkles around her eyes give away that she's in her 50s. "Would you like to come inside? I can offer tea or coffee." "Sure, Mom. We need to talk." "Of course we do. We always do. My home is a reflection of my life. Every single thing here has a story and a place. Nothing is too much. Everything is functional and neat. Madison often says I live in a museum, but to me it's just a home where every object reminds me of something important. While I make coffee, Lloyd looks around the living room as if assessing how much it's all worth. He has an occupational deformity. He's always counting everything in terms of money. Madison sits on the couch, tapping her foot nervously on the floor. So, I say, setting down the cups, what brings you to me this time? We need to discuss your health, Mom, Madison begins. You're getting less active. Less active? I can't hold back a laugh. Honey, people don't usually run marathons at 76. You know what I mean? We're worried about you, living alone in a big house. I'm doing just fine, thank you. Lloyd clears his throat. Blythe, we were thinking, maybe you should consider a nursing home. There's a beautiful place in Topeka, very modern, with medical care. How much does it cost? I interrupt, knowing the answer. Well, it's not cheap, Lloyd admits. But you have savings, and you can sell the house. That's it. It's always the same. My money, my house, what Orville and I have accumulated through years of hard work and saving. My savings are for my life, Lloyd, and I plan on living it in my house for the rest of it. But you can't take that money to the grave with you, Madison blurted out, and I could see Lloyd cringe at the bluntness of it. No, I can't, I agree calmly. But as long as I'm alive, I'll dispose of them as I see fit. Mom, you're unbearable. Madison stands up, spilling her coffee. We're trying to help you. No, honey, you're trying to help yourself. The difference is significant. Lloyd tries to defuse the situation, but it's too late. Madison's already turned on. You've always been like this, stingy, suspicious, trusting no one, not even your own daughter. I'm not answering that. There's no point. It's all been said 1,000 times. Instead, I ask, how's Albert doing? Does my grandson still remember what his grandmother looks like? It was a low blow, but I'm tired. Bertie is fine, Madison replies coldly. He's a freshman in college, getting good grades. But student loans are so huge right now. Oh, that's what it is. So you need money for that too. It's not that I'm against helping my grandson, but they've never brought him to me, and I know the money won't be for his education. I'll think about it, I say tiredly. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to rest. I've been getting tired a lot lately. That's true. I do get tired faster. And then there's this pain in my side that hasn't gone away for weeks. But I put it down to age. What else can you expect when you're in your 70s? Madison and Lloyd are leaving, but I know they'll be back. They always come back when they need money. I watch their car pull out of the yard and sigh. It's strange that the only person I've ever truly loved has produced someone so foreign to me. In the evening, the pain in my side worsens, and I have to take a painkiller. Sitting in Orville's chair, I look through old photo albums. Here's Madison as a child, a serious girl with pigtails. Here's Orville and me at the lake, young and happy. Here's our wedding, a modest ceremony at City Hall. You were the most beautiful bride in the world, Orville said, even though I was wearing a simple dress bought at a discount. He always saw beauty in simple things. Closing the album, I feel a sharp pain shoot through me. The pills aren't helping. Maybe I really should see a doctor, but I don't like hospitals so much. Orville died in a hospital, and I've avoided those places ever since. I decide that if the pain doesn't go away by the end of the week, I'll make an appointment after all. In the meantime, another pill and an early bedtime. Nighttime always brings relief. On my way to the bedroom, I pass Orville's office. There, hidden behind a painting of Lake Canapache, is a safe. In it is $875,000 in cash. It's not that I don't trust banks. It's just that Orville always said you should keep some of your money at home, just in case. Money you can touch is the only real money, Blighty, he used to say. I wonder what he would say about Madison and Lloyd now. Probably would have laughed and said something like, Blighty, You take it too seriously. They're just the way they are. But I'm not Orville. I don't know how to laugh at things that hurt. And with each visit from my relatives, that pain gets worse. Or is it still a side? I'm not sure anymore. As I fall asleep, I think about how strange life is. You are born, you grow up, you meet love, you start a family, you save money, all so that at the end of the journey, you can lie in the dark and wonder if it was all for nothing. In the morning, the pain recedes a little. I decide to go to the doctor after all, just to be sure. Dr. Hedges is a young specialist, but he's attentive and not as condescending as most doctors who only see you as an old lady with typical senile complaints. Mrs. Irving, he says, making an appointment for me. Is tomorrow at 10 o'clock okay with you? That's fine with me. In the meantime, I decide to walk around Salina, enjoying the rare cloudless day. The city is changing, but slowly. New signs on old buildings, new faces among the familiar ones from my childhood. I walk into River's grocery store, now called Fresh Foods Supermarket, but the inside is still the same as it was 50 years ago. Good afternoon, Mrs. Irving. Polly, the cashier, the daughter of my former library colleague, greets me. How are you? I'm fine, thank you, I reply, though it's not quite true. I saw your daughter and her husband yesterday. Are they passing through town? In a small town, everyone knows everything. It's both a blessing and a curse. Yes, they came to visit their old mother, I say, picking apples. That's so nice of them. Polly smiles. Not everyone is lucky enough to have such caring children. If only she knew. Coming home, I feel tired and that nagging pain again. Maybe I should have asked Madison to stay with me, to help. But I know how that would end. More talk about the nursing home, about selling the house, about how impractical it is to keep money in a safe. No, I can handle it. Just like I've been doing all these years since Orville died. Tonight, the phone rings. Madison. Mom, Lloyd and I were thinking, maybe you should consider a house in Topeka after all. I could come visit you every weekend. Madison, we've talked about this. I'm not going anywhere. But you can't live alone forever. What if you fall down or get sick? Then I'll use the emergency button I had installed last year. Or I'll call the neighbors. You can't be serious, Mom. You need constant care. I sigh. Let's get back to this conversation later, okay? I'm tired. Hanging up the phone, I sit back in my chair and close my eyes. The pain is building up again. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll find out what's wrong with me. In the meantime, I'll think about the good things, about how Orville and I used to go to the lake every summer, how he taught me how to type on the old printing press, about how we dreamed of trips we never took because there were always more important things to do and spend. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe we should finally use our savings for the things we dreamed of, instead of saving it for a daughter who only sees it as an opportunity to buy a new car or a bigger house. With these thoughts, I fall asleep right in my chair, and I dream of Orville, young and laughing, reaching out to me and calling me somewhere far away. Dr. Hedges's office smelled of lemon air freshener and antiseptic. I sat on the edge of a couch draped in crisp paper and watched the young doctor study the results of my tests. His face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed concern. A bad sign. That's not how you break good news. Mrs. Irving, he finally said, taking off his glasses, I'm afraid I have some disappointing news. I nodded, keeping outwardly calm. Inside, however, I felt as if something had snapped. How disappointing, Dr. Hedges. You have an advanced form of pancreatic cancer. It appears to be spreading quite rapidly. We can administer chemotherapy, but given your age and stage of disease, how much time do I have left? I interrupted him. At my age, there's no point in beating around the bush. He paused, as if weighing whether to tell the truth. I estimate 3 to 6 months. Strangely, I was relieved. Not from the diagnosis, of course, but from the certainty. I now knew what I was dealing with. I would recommend palliative care to relieve the symptoms, Hedges continued. And of course, it's worth discussing this with your family. The support of loved ones is very important at times like this. I imagined that conversation with Madison and Lloyd, and I could barely contain a bitter laugh. Support from loved ones. I wish. Thank you, doctor. I'll think about your recommendations. Mrs. Irving, there was concern in his voice. You don't have to go through this alone. I'm not alone, I lied. I have a family. Walking out of the clinic, I sat on a bench in the small park across the street. The spring wind played with the fallen magnolia flowers, scattering them along the paths. Life went on around me, mothers walking with their children, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers laughing about something on their phones. Just an ordinary day in Salina. And for me, the day I learned the date of my approximate departure from this world. What would Orville have done when he learned of this diagnosis? Probably make a list of all the places he wanted to visit and drag me on a crazy trip. Life's too short to put happiness on hold, Blighty, he often said. But I'd always been practical, always thinking ahead. And now my future had shrunk to a few months. I decided to walk home, even though I was tired. I needed to think about what to do next. Should I tell Madison? Knowing her, she'd start talking about the funeral and the inheritance. And Lloyd, he's probably already counting my savings in his head. No, I won't tell them. Not yet, anyway. First, I have to decide what to do with the time and money I have left. Perhaps it's selfish, but after so many years of taking care of others, I wanted to spend my last months the way I wanted to, not Madison or Lloyd. As I passed Eleanor Foster's house, I heard her call out, "Blythe, how are you, my dear? I haven't seen you for a long time." Eleanor, my age and perhaps the only person in Celine I could call a friend, was standing by her hedge, pruning roses. I'd met her in high school, and we'd kept in touch, not intimately, but warmly. "It's okay, Ellie," I lied, coming closer. "I've just been busy." "Come in for tea," she suggested. I made blueberry pie. I wanted to decline, but I realized I wasn't ready to go back to an empty house with my gloomy thoughts. It was my pleasure. Eleanor's house was the exact opposite of mine. Brightly colored, stocked with knickknacks, with pictures of her many grandchildren on every surface. She was widowed before I was, but unlike me, she was surrounded by a loving family. "I saw Madison and her husband come to see you," Eleanor said, pouring tea. "How are they?" "The usual," I answered evasively. "Busy, successful." Eleanor nodded understandingly. She knew about my difficult relationship with my daughter. "You know, I've always wondered how you handle them." She sighed. "My Carol can be demanding too, but at least she cares for me genuinely, not because of—" She trailed off, but I realized that she was not. She paused, but I knew what she meant. Not the money. "It's okay, Ellie. I've long since accepted the way things are between us." We talked some more about the town news, about her grandchildren, about the new pastor at the local church, just the usual conversation between two old women. I didn't tell her about my diagnosis. I didn't want pity. As I was about to leave, Eleanor's phone rang. She apologized and went into the next room, leaving the door ajar. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but when I heard my daughter's name, I strained my hearing. "Yes, Madison, she was just in my room," Eleanor said. "No, she didn't say anything about moving." "What? A nursing home?" But Blythe had always been so independent. I froze, clutching my cup. "I don't think it's a good idea," Eleanor continued. "She loves her home. Yes, I understand that you're worried about her savings. But savings. Of course, it's always about the money. Lloyd, I'm not getting involved in this." Eleanor's voice grew colder. Blythe is my friend, and I'm not going to convince her to sell the house or transfer the money to your accounts. If you're really concerned about her well-being, find another way to help. I quietly set my cup down and walked out of the house without waiting for the conversation to end. So, Madison and Lloyd are calling people I know, trying to find allies in their plan. No surprise. At home, the first thing I did was check the safe behind the painting. The money was there, $875,000, neatly tied with bank tape. Orville had always insisted on keeping a substantial amount in cash. Banks come and go, Blighty, but cash will always stay cash. Of course, most of our savings were in accounts and securities, but we always kept that amount at home, for a rainy day, as Orville used to say. And so it came, that rainy day, just not the one we expected. I sat in the chair looking at the money and suddenly remembered something else Orville used to say. Money should work for you, not you for it. How many years had I spent saving every dime, saving for a future that now wouldn't exist? A phone call interrupted my musings. Mom, it's me. Madison's voice sounded unusually soft. I just wanted to see how you were feeling. I'm fine, I answered, fighting the urge to ask about her conversation with Eleanor. Lloyd and I were thinking, maybe we should come up this weekend, help you with the house, the garden. You don't mind, do you? Oh, I knew exactly what they were going to help with. Looking for documents, assessing the value of the house, maybe even try to look behind the painting where the safe is hidden. I'll be busy this weekend, I said. Maybe next time. Busy doing what? There was a hint of irritation in her voice. I have plans with Eleanor. With Eleanor? She couldn't hide her surprise. Since when are you so close to her? We've been friends for 60 years, Madison. It's just that you've never been interested in it. After an awkward pause, she changed tactics. Okay, Mom, but if you need anything, just give me a call, okay? Sure. After hanging up, I sat still for a while. Madison and Lloyd's plan was becoming clearer and clearer. Convince me I couldn't live on my own, move me into a nursing home, get control of my finances. And now that I knew about my illness, their plan could work, because sooner or later, I really would be too weak to resist. Unless I got ahead of them. I looked at the safe, and a plan began to form in my mind. Orville's lessons on making moulages came to mind. It's the details that count, Blighty. The right details make a fake convincing. In the garage, in the old boxes of Orville's stuff, were to be left his tools and materials. He never threw away anything that might come in handy. Despite my fatigue and pain, I went to the garage. Dusty boxes cluttered the shelves, each neatly signed by Orville's hand. Tools, photographs, typography. His handwriting, so familiar, brought a lump to my throat. The box labeled typography was heavy. I struggled to pull it off the shelf and opened it. Inside were Orville's tools, magnifying glasses, tweezers, special scissors, thin brushes, and most importantly, an album with samples of his work, including moulages of money he'd made for the theater. I pulled out the album and opened it. The pages were labeled with photographs of his work, with notes on how they were made. Orville had always been methodical. Sample $50 bill for a production of The Great Gatsby. One caption read, "Special paper aged with tea brew was used. Details added with watercolors under a microscope." I flipped through the pages, remembering how Orville and I would sit in his studio in the evenings, bent over our work. He'd taught me to notice the smallest details, to copy them with a precision even a counterfeiter would envy. Never use these skills for deception, Blighty, he always warned. Only for art. Well, now I had to use them for defense, from my own daughter and son-in-law, who I had no doubt would stop at nothing to get their hands on my savings. I continued to examine the box and found something else important, a small bottle labeled Special Ink. Orville used them to create watermarks. This ink was special. It only became visible under certain lights. The idea began to take shape. I'll create fake bills so similar to the real ones that Madison and Lloyd won't know the difference on a cursory examination. But the first time they try to use them, the deception will be exposed. And the real money I'll transfer to a new account. Or, better yet, multiple accounts at different banks. I returned to the house with the box and the sketchbook. I laid out the materials on the table, figuring out what else I might need. I'd have to buy special paper, maybe order it online. And a printer. My old one would hardly do the job. The pain in my side reminded me of itself, and I took a painkiller. Time was working against me, not just because of Madison and Lloyd's plans, but because of my illness. I needed to act fast while I still had my strength. I sat down at my computer ancient by Madison's standards, but functional, and started looking up information about high-resolution printers. Then I checked my bank accounts, thinking about the best way to spend my money. Maybe she should donate some of it to charity, or bequeath it to the local library where I'd worked for 30 years, or use it for that trip Orville and I had always dreamed of. The ideas were many, but one thing I knew for sure was that Madison and Lloyd wouldn't get a dime of that money. They'd already gotten enough from me through their years of manipulation and extortion. By late afternoon, I had made a list of the materials I needed and found a store where I could buy everything I needed. I would go there tomorrow. In the meantime, I took the money out of the safe and began to study it carefully. The texture, the color, the smallest details of the pattern. It was a painstaking job, but I was always patient. The next day, despite the growing pain, I went to Topeka, the nearest large city, where I could find everything I needed without attracting the attention of the local gossips. I bought paper, paints, brushes, and a new high-resolution printer at a specialty store for artists. "Are you into calligraphy?" the saleswoman asked me as she packed my purchases. "Yes, in my old age, I decided to take up a new hobby," I said with a smile. When I got home, I got to work right away. In Orville's office, I laid out the real bills in front of me and began examining them under a magnifying glass, making notes on every detail. The process was even more complicated than I remembered, but with each hour of work, the skills Orville had taught me came back. My hands remembered the movements, my eyes remembered the details to pay attention to. By the end of the week, I had created the first fake $100 bill. From a few feet away, it looked absolutely real. Only on closer inspection could you notice the differences: a slightly different shade of paint, subtle differences in the lines. And I also added my own touch. Using Orville's special ink, I wrote a small mark on the back of each bill, visible only under ultraviolet light. The mark read, "Property of Blythe Irving, not real money." It was my way of saying, "I knew you'd come for it." The work progressed slowly but methodically. Each day the pain got worse, and I had to take more breaks. But I didn't give up. This became my mission, my final project. At the same time, I got busy with my real money. I opened several new accounts at different banks, transferred most of my money into them. I met with a lawyer to update my will. Now most of my fortune was to go to the Orville Irving Scholarship Fund for students studying the art of printmaking. Madison called almost every day, growing more insistent each time. "Mom, are you sure you're doing okay? Maybe we should come over after all." "I'm doing fine, Madison. Don't worry about it." "But you sound, weird, tired." "I'm 76 years old, honey. At my age, it's normal to be tired." I knew she wouldn't calm down. Sooner or later, they would come, and I had to be ready. After 2 weeks of hard work, everything was ready. $875,000 in moulages lay in a safe behind the painting, looking just like the real money that used to be kept there. The real money, on the other hand, was safely organized into various accounts to which only I had access. The evening of the day I finished work, the pain became almost unbearable. The painkillers hardly helped at all. I knew I would soon need more serious medical attention. But before I gave in to the disease, I wanted to make sure my plan would work. I had no doubt that Madison and Lloyd would try to get their hands on my money. It was just a matter of when, and I was ready to meet them. Sitting in Orville's chair, I looked at the picture taken on our wedding day. He was smiling so wide, so genuinely. "You'd be proud of me, Orville," I thought. "I'm finally putting your lessons to good use." I devoted the next 2 weeks to convincing Madison and Lloyd of my deteriorating condition. It wasn't that hard. The pain was doing its job, and I didn't have to pretend much. I just stopped hiding how bad I was feeling. During phone calls, I often stopped talking in the middle of a sentence, as if I'd forgotten what I was saying. Sometimes I called Madison by her high school friend's name. Once I even mixed up the day of the week, telling my daughter it was Sunday when it was Thursday. "Mom, you're scaring me," Madison said after a particularly convincing episode when I forgot we'd talked the day before. "You need to see a doctor." "I'm fine, honey," I replied, adding a slight tremor to my voice. "I just get confused sometimes. It's normal at my age." "It's not normal. You've always been sharper than a razor. Lloyd and I are coming up this weekend, and it's out of the question." "Whatever you say, darling." I added a note of resignation to my voice that I'd never allowed myself before. As I hung up the phone, I allowed myself a small smile. The plan was working. Of course, I couldn't pretend all the time. The disease was progressing, and it was getting harder every day to manage the pain. Dr. Hedges prescribed stronger painkillers, but I tried to take them only at night to keep my mind clear during the day. On Friday, the day before Madison and Lloyd arrived, I finished the final preparations. Placing the fake money in the safe, just as the real ones had been before, I checked my work one last time. Even knowing they were fakes, I could hardly tell the difference. The paper was a little less smooth to the touch, and the colors were slightly different in certain lights. But you had to know what you were looking for to notice it. Closing the safe, I hung the painting of Lake Canapachi in place. Everything was ready. I called Eleanor, the only person I could trust. "Ellie, they're coming tomorrow. I'm pretty sure they're gonna try to pull something." "Blythe, maybe you're exaggerating." There was doubt in my friend's voice. "I know Madison can be pushy, but she's your daughter. You don't hear their conversations the way I do," I countered. "They think I'm an old woman out of my mind, and they want control of my money and sell the house." Eleanor sighed. "What can I do?" "Just stay in touch. If anything happens, I'll call you." Before going to bed, I took a painkiller and settled in bed with a book. But I couldn't read. My mind kept returning to the upcoming visit. What if I was wrong? What if Madison and Lloyd were really just worried about me? But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. For too many years, I'd watched their manipulations, their constant attempts to access my savings. Too many times I'd heard them discuss what they would buy when they got their inheritance. Madison and Lloyd arrived the next day at noon sharp. I met them on the veranda, deliberately staggering and leaning on a cane I didn't usually use. "Mommy!" Madison rushed over to me, grabbing me under the elbow. "You can't stand on your feet." "I'm fine, honey," I mumbled, letting her lead the way into the house. "Just a little tired today." Lloyd followed us, carrying the suitcases. His eyes quickly assessed the surroundings. "Are you planning on staying the night?" I asked once we were in the living room. "Of course, Mom." Madison sat me down in the chair and adjusted the comforter on my lap. "We talked about this yesterday. Don't you remember?" I faked confusion. "Yesterday? We talked yesterday? Madison exchanged glances with Lloyd. That's exactly the reaction I was looking for. Yes, Mom. We talked on the phone. I said we'd come and stay the weekend to help you. Oh, yes, of course. I rubbed my temples as if trying to focus. I'm sorry, honey. Sometimes I forget things. It's okay. Madison sat down next to me, taking my hands in hers. Mom, we need to have a serious talk about your condition. And they started. The same arguments. I can't live alone. I need care. The house is too big for me. I listened, nodding and at times looking confused, like I was having trouble following the conversation. I just don't understand why you're so stubbornly refusing to help, Madison finally said, clearly losing patience. Lloyd and I just want you to be safe. I know, honey, I replied quietly. It's just hard for me to imagine a life outside of this house. There are so many memories here. You can take the memories with you, Mom. What about my things? The furniture? See, I paused deliberately, as if trying to remember something important. What, Mom? Madison stepped forward, suddenly interested. It doesn't matter. I waved my hand. I'd forgotten what I was going to say. Lloyd, who'd been silent for most of the conversation, finally joined in. Blythe, are you worried about your valuables, your papers, your jewelry, maybe your savings? I looked at him with feigned surprise. Yes, that's right, my savings. Orville always said you should have money for a rainy day. Madison gave her husband a look that I understood perfectly. They took the bait. Don't worry, Mom, she said, patting my arm. We'll help you sort everything out. Why don't you get some rest while we make dinner? I let them tuck me in the bedroom, pretending I needed an afternoon nap. In fact, I'd planned to watch what they did. But fatigue and pain took their toll, and I actually dozed off. I woke up to whispers outside the door. Are you sure she's asleep? Madison's voice. I'm positive. I looked in 5 minutes ago and she hadn't even moved. All right, uh-huh. Let's take a quick look around. She said something about saving money. I carefully lifted myself up on the bed, trying not to make a sound. Through the crack of the ajar door, I could see Madison and Lloyd sneaking down the hall to Orville's office. My heart beat faster. They really were looking for money. Not that I doubted it, but it was one thing to suspect, and quite another to see it with my own eyes. I got up quietly and crept to the door, listening. Muffled voices came from the study. Look everywhere, Madison commanded. Desk drawers, books. What if she wakes up? We'll say we were looking for a photo album. She wouldn't remember what we said 5 minutes ago anyway. I clenched my fists. My own daughter was talking about me like I was an old woman out of her mind. And this after all the years I'd taken care of her, given her everything I could. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to calm down. This wasn't the time to get emotional. I had to see if they could find the safe. Lloyd, look behind the paintings, Madison said after a few minutes of searching without success. Old people often hide money behind paintings or under the mattress. All these paintings? Start with the big ones, the one with the lake. I held my breath. They were close. Wait. Lloyd's voice became excited. There's something here. I heard them taking the painting off the wall. The safe, Madison hissed. I knew it, but we don't know the combination, objected Lloyd. Try her birthday or her wedding day. Old people always use dates like that. I almost smiled. The combination was much harder. The date Orville and I first met, plus the number of our first house. But I'd purposely left the safe unlocked, just covering the door. Wait, Lloyd said after several failed attempts. I don't think it's locked. There was a pause, and then Madison whispered excitedly, Oh my God, you see that? I can't believe it. Lloyd's voice shook with excitement. How many are there? It looks like hundreds of thousands. Maybe 1 million. I moved cautiously along the hallway, trying not to squeak the floorboards. I needed to see their faces when they discovered my savings. From my position at the end of the hallway, I could partially see the office through the reflection in the mirror. Madison and Lloyd were standing at the open safe, Lloyd's hands filled with wads of bills. $875,000, Madison said, quickly counting the stacks. Do you have any idea what we can do with that? Maddie, we can't just take the money, Lloyd said, but without much conviction. It's stealing. It's not stealing if she was gonna leave it to us anyway. We're just, we're just speeding things up. What if she notices they're missing? Madison laughed, and the sound sent a chill down my spine. You saw the state she was in? She wouldn't remember in an hour that she even had the money. I saw Lloyd hesitate, but only for a moment. You're right, but what do we say if someone asks us how we got that kind of money? We'll say it's an inheritance from my uncle in Idaho. No one will check. What about your mother? What if she does notice? Madison shrugged. We'll say she gave them to us and forgot. Who would believe an old woman with advanced dementia against us? I covered my mouth with my hand so I wouldn't give myself away. My own daughter, my own flesh and blood, talking about me with such contempt, such cold calculation. All right, Lloyd decided, but we must act quickly. Pack up the money, and I'll see if she's awake. I darted noiselessly back into the bedroom, barely had time to lie down and close my eyes when Lloyd peeked inside. Pretending to be asleep, I listened as he quietly closed the door and went back into the study. Sleeping like a baby, he informed Madison. What are we going to do with the money? We'll put it in a suitcase. We'll say we have to leave right away because of work problems or something. What about taking care of her? I mean, we're supposedly here to help her. We'll say we'll be back in a couple days. We'll figure out what to do with the money by then. As I lay there listening to them collect my fake savings, I felt a strange mix of emotions, bitterness at the betrayal, anger, but also some grim satisfaction that I was right and had managed to outsmart them. After a while, the door to my bedroom opened again, and Madison walked in. Mom, she gently touched my shoulder. Mom, wake up. I opened my eyes slowly, feigning sleepiness. Madison, what's wrong? Mom, Lloyd and I need to leave right away. There's a problem at work, and we need to get back to the city right away. Oh, I faked a look of disappointment. But you just got here. I know, and I'm sorry, but we'll be back in a couple days, I promise. I already made you dinner, it's in the fridge, and I've put your meds in containers, morning, afternoon, and evening. You're so thoughtful, honey. I smiled at her with feigned gratitude. Madison leaned over and kissed my cheek. Get some rest, Mom. We'll call you when we get home. I watched her leave the room and heard her and Lloyd hurriedly packing. Their suitcase was now considerably heavier than when they arrived. Through the window, I watched them load their things into the car. Lloyd carefully placed the suitcase with the money in the trunk, looking around as if he feared they were being watched. If only he'd known. Madison waved toward the house, and they drove off, taking 875,000 counterfeit dollars with them. When the sound of the engine died away, I slowly got out of bed and walked to the window. The street was empty, with only fallen leaves swirling in the cool fall air. I felt strangely empty. Everything had gone exactly as I had planned. They had taken the bait without even thinking about the consequences, and soon those consequences would be upon them. I went back to Orville's office. The safe was open, the painting carelessly hung back on the wall. They hadn't even bothered to cover up the evidence of their crime, so sure that I wouldn't notice. Sinking heavily into Orville's chair, I allowed myself a moment of weakness. The tears I'd been holding back finally flowed down my cheeks, not because of the money. I didn't care about that, but because of the final confirmation that my only daughter only saw me as a source of money. Wiping the tears away, I picked up my phone and dialed Eleanor's number. Ellie, they did it, I said when she answered. Took all the money out of the safe. Oh, Blythe. She sounded genuinely sympathetic. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I was ready. They took the fakes. And now what? Now. I took a deep breath. We wait. Pretty soon they'll try to use that money and find out that I'm not the helpless old woman they thought I was. Hanging up the phone, I looked at the empty safe again. A strange sense of freedom swept over me. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying all these years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. My body was betraying me, my time was short, but my mind was still sharp, and I wouldn't let anyone, not even my own daughter, take away the last of my dignity. The morning was unusually quiet. I woke with the first rays of the sun, an old habit I could never break. The pain in my side came back as soon as I tried to turn around. The pills were on the bedside table. Madison had actually put them in containers before she left, a small act of caring that now seemed especially bittersweet. I rose slowly and wandered into the kitchen. The house seemed empty and lifeless, though I didn't usually feel lonely. Maybe it was because now I knew for sure that the people closest to me had betrayed me. There was no room for doubt or excuses. Turning on the coffee maker, I looked out the window. The day promised to be clear but cool. Typical Kansas fall. I wondered if Madison and Lloyd had made it home yet. They lived in Wichita, about 2 hours from Salina. If they'd left last night, they should be awake in their own bed by now, probably going through the stolen money and planning how to spend it. The cup of coffee warmed my hands, but not my soul. I felt a strange numbness. Yesterday, when I had seen them with my own eyes, stealing my savings, my emotions had overwhelmed me. Today, however, I felt only emptiness and a slight anxiety as I waited for the inevitable. They would try to use the money, and then everything would be revealed. The phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. Madison. I let it ring a few times before answering it. Good morning, honey, I said, trying to keep my voice sounding normal. Mom, Lloyd and I made it all right. How are you feeling? Not bad, considering, I said. The pills are helping. Did you take your morning meds? And don't forget to eat breakfast. I left a casserole in the fridge for you. Such care, such attention. It's not like she didn't steal my life savings last night. Yeah, I'm all set, thanks. I'll play along. How's work going? That's why you left so urgently, isn't it? Short pause on the other end of the line. Yeah, it's all worked out, thankfully. Lloyd, uh, was able to work things out. That's good to hear. I sipped my coffee. When are you planning on coming back? Maybe next weekend. She sounded excited now. Lloyd and I were discussing, we have some exciting news, but we'd rather talk about it when we meet. Interesting news? I feigned interest. What kind of news? It's a surprise, Mom, but I think you're going to like it. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. I'm sure they've already come up with a story to explain the sudden wealth. Maybe a lucky lottery or an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. I'll look forward to it, I said. After a few more minutes of idle conversation, we said goodbye. I sat staring at the phone for a long time. Madison wasn't just calling to check on me. She wanted to make sure I hadn't discovered the theft, and she seemed pleased with my reaction. I spent the rest of the morning going through the mail and paying bills, the usual daily chores that were strangely calming. Routine is an anchor to hold on to when everything around me is falling apart. Around noon, Eleanor called. How are you, Blythe? There was genuine concern in her voice. Alive, as you can see, I answered. They took the money and left. Madison called this morning to see if I'd noticed anything. What are you going to do now? Wait, Pretty soon, they're going to try to use that money. What if they get suspicious and come back? Maybe you should stay with me for a few days. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. No, Ellie, I'm going to stay here. This is my home, and I'm not going to let fear corner me. After the call, I felt tired and laid down to rest. The illness was taking more and more of my energy, and simple actions took a tremendous amount of effort. I woke up to the ringing of the phone. It was 15:40 on the clock, an unknown number. I hesitated, but answered it. Mrs. Irving? A man's voice asked. This is Sheriff Daniels from Wichita. Do you have a minute to talk? My heart jumped. This is it. Here it comes. Of course, Sheriff. What can I do for you? Mrs. Irving, I'm calling about a rather sensitive matter. A man was apprehended today at the Townist Mall in Wichita, trying to pay with counterfeit bills. He identified himself as Lloyd Thorndike and claims to be your son-in-law. Is that correct? I took a deep breath. Moment of truth. Yes, Lloyd is married to my daughter Madison. I see. The thing is, Mrs. Irving, Mr. Thorndike claims that this money belongs to you. He says you gave it to him for— The sheriff hesitated, apparently checking his notes. To invest in real estate. I almost laughed. Real estate investments. How ingenious. Interesting, I said in a neutral tone. How much of that money did he have? $100,000, Mrs. Irving, all in $100 bills, all of which our forensics have determined to be high-grade forgeries. Forgeries? I acted surprised. No, you didn't. I'm afraid so. Mr. Thorndike was trying to buy a car and put down a deposit of $10,000 in cash. The manager of the dealership noticed something was wrong with the bills and called the police. I shook my head. Lloyd had always been impulsive. Of course, the first thing he did was run out and buy an expensive car. Sheriff, this is some kind of misunderstanding. I didn't give Lloyd any money. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Thorndike insists he got the money from you. He also claims that you may have, memory problems. Really? I couldn't help my sarcasm. I'm curious that he thinks that. Mrs. Irving, I need to ask you a direct question. Do you keep large amounts of cash at home? I paused, thinking about the answer. I had a safe, Sheriff Daniels, behind a painting in my late husband's study. You did? Yes. Yesterday I found it empty. Now the pause on his part has grown longer. Mrs. Irving, did you report the theft? No, I answered. I wasn't sure who might have taken the money. I didn't want to press charges without proof. I see, he said, a touch of sympathy in his voice. And when did you last see Mr. and Mrs. Thorndike? Yesterday, I said. They came to see me, but they left suddenly in the evening, citing some problem at work. Did they know of the existence of the safe before that? I don't think I ever mentioned it to them, I answered. Technically, it was true. I had never directly told them about the safe. Mrs. Irving, I have to ask, are you prepared to press charges against Mr. and Mrs. Thorndike for theft? That's the key point. I could send them to prison right now. One word from me and Madison and Lloyd will be behind bars. My daughter, my flesh and blood. Yeah, I'm not sure, Sheriff. This is a very big decision. Of course it is, he agreed. Perhaps you should think about it. In any case, Mr. Thorndike will remain in custody until the circumstances are clarified. We have enough evidence to hold him on suspicion of counterfeiting, whether he knew it or not. What about my daughter, Madison? Mrs. Thorndike is at the station too, but only to testify for now. She claims she knew nothing about the money, that her husband only showed it to her this morning. I almost smiled. Madison had always been trickier than Lloyd. Of course she's going to try to separate herself from him in this story. Sheriff, may I ask what happens next? We'll continue our investigation, Mrs. Irving. It's likely that officers will be coming to you for a formal statement. We'll also need to see where the safe was located. Of course, I'm willing to cooperate, I said, but right now I'd like some time to think about this whole situation. Of course, this is a difficult ordeal for you. He sounded genuinely sympathetic. We'll contact you later for more details. After we said goodbye, I sat staring at the space in front of me for a long time. The plan had worked even faster than I'd expected. Lloyd apparently couldn't help himself and decided to spend some of the money immediately. And, as I'd expected, he'd gotten caught with his first big purchase. The phone rang again. Madison. I hesitated, not knowing if I was ready to hear her excuses and lies. Finally, on the fifth ring, I answered. Mom! Her voice sounded hysterical. Mom, this is a nightmare. Lloyd's been arrested. What? I acted shocked. Arrested? For what? There's been some kind of terrible misunderstanding. Madison was sobbing. He was trying to buy a car, and he was accused of using counterfeit money. But that's impossible. Where could he have gotten counterfeit money from? I remained silent, letting her continue. Mom, it's so scary. They're holding him at the station, talking about a federal offense. I don't know what to do. Madison, calm down, I said firmly. Tell me everything in order. Lloyd showed me the money this morning. He said it was his bonus at work, that he wanted to surprise me. So we went to the car dealership, and suddenly the police show up. They said the money was fake. And Lloyd? She paused, and I could almost see the gears in her head turning, making up a story as she went along. Lloyd suddenly told them that he got the money from you, that you gave it to him to invest. Mother, I don't understand anything. Neither do I, dear, I replied, remaining calm. I just got a call from Sheriff Daniels. He said they found 100,000 counterfeit dollars in Lloyd's possession. Yes, and Lloyd claims it's your money, but that's crazy. Where would you get that kind of money, especially fake money? I paused, like I was thinking about what she said. Madison, you were at my house yesterday. Did you go into Orville's office? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. No, she finally said in a shaky voice. What makes you say that? Just asking, I said. You see, I did have the money, in the safe behind the painting of the lake. $875,000. What? She sounded genuinely shocked now. You had that much cash? In the house? Yeah. Your father always preferred to keep some of his savings at home. For a rainy day, he said. Were they real? She asked cautiously. Of course they were real. Orville and I had been saving all our lives. But then, I don't understand. If Lloyd's money is fake and your money is real, then… I don't get it either, I interrupted her. The weird thing is, when I checked the safe this morning, it was empty. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Mom, Madison finally said in a shaky voice, you don't think it's me that we… I don't know what to think, Madison. My voice sounded tired, and it wasn't an act. I just know that my money is gone, and Lloyd was arrested with counterfeit bills that he attributes to me for some reason. Mom, please. She was openly crying now. You've got to help. Tell them there's been some kind of mistake. What kind of mistake, Madison? I asked. That Lloyd didn't take my money? Or that the money they found on him was real? Yeah, I don't know, she exclaimed. Just help us. I sighed. Madison, I'm really tired. I need to think about all of this. The sheriff said they would continue the investigation. Maybe then everything will be clearer. You can't just leave us. There was desperation in her voice now. Lloyd's going to jail. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied calmly. But I can't cover up a theft, Madison. If Lloyd took my money… We didn't take your money, she shouted. This is all some terrible misunderstanding. Then why is my safe empty? And why does Lloyd claim I gave him the money? This time, the silence lasted even longer. I don't know, she said at last, almost in a whisper. I really don't know. I'm sorry, Madison. I'm really sorry for the way things turned out. And it was the truth. Despite their betrayal, a part of me still loved them and ached to teach them this lesson. What am I going to do? She asked, and in her voice, for the first time in a long time, I heard the intonation of the little girl who had once come to me for advice and comfort. I don't know, dear. Maybe you and Lloyd should tell the truth, whatever that truth is. After a few more minutes of fruitless attempts to convince me to help, Madison hung up. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mixture of bitterness and satisfaction. The plan had worked, but winning didn't bring joy. I got up and walked over to the dresser where there was a picture of Madison as a child, a smiling girl with pigtails, looking so much like Orville. Somewhere along the way into adulthood, she had lost that sincerity, that innocence. Maybe it was my fault, too. Maybe Orville and I had worried too much about the future, about money, about security, and hadn't paid enough attention to the most important thing, instilling the right values in my daughter. But now it was too late for regrets. Madison had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. The phone rang again. This time it was Sheriff Daniels. Mrs. Irving, we have some news. Mr. Thorndyke has admitted to taking money from your house without permission. However, he insists he didn't know it was counterfeit. I see, I replied. And my daughter? Mrs. Thorndyke claims she was unaware of the theft. She says her husband showed her the money only this morning, saying he'd gotten it as a bonus at work. I shook my head. Madison threw Lloyd to the wolves without even hesitating. Sheriff, I'd like to ask, what would be the consequences for them? That depends on a lot of factors, Mrs. Irving, including whether or not you press charges for the theft, and, of course, the outcome of the counterfeit bills investigation. I took a deep breath. I need to think about this, Sheriff. This is a very difficult decision. Of course, Mrs. Irving. We'll send officers over tomorrow to inspect the crime scene and get your official statement. In the meantime, he paused. I'd recommend you get some rest. You've been through quite a shock. We said goodbye, and I was alone in the silence of the house. It was beginning to get dark outside the window. Another day was coming to an end, one of the few days I had left. In the morning, 2 officers from the Salina Police Department arrived. Young, polite, they stomped awkwardly into my living room, clearly unsure of how to deal with an elderly woman who had been the victim of theft at the hands of her own daughter. Mrs. Irving, we understand how difficult this is for you. The older man, who introduced himself as Officer Baker, began. Sheriff Daniels asked us to examine the crime scene and record your statement. I escorted them into Orville's office and showed them the safe behind the painting. The young officer, Ramirez, carefully removed the painting with his gloves and examined the safe door. No sign of forced entry, he remarked. Was the safe opened with a key or a combination? A combination, I answered. But lately I often forget to lock it after I check the contents. The officers looked at each other. I knew what they were thinking. A typical absent-minded old lady, an easy target for unscrupulous relatives. And how much money was in the safe, Mrs. Irving? Baker asked, pulling out a notebook. $875,000 in cash, I answered, mostly in $100 bills, but there were other denominations too. Ramirez whistled, but immediately became embarrassed and apologized. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's just that this is a substantial amount of money to keep at home. My late husband didn't trust banks, I explained with a slight smile, and I continued to follow his habit. I see. Baker nodded. Mrs. Irving, could you tell me how and when you discovered it missing? I described in detail the events of the last few days: Madison and Lloyd's visit, their sudden departure, my discovery of the empty safe. "And you're sure you didn't give them permission to take the money?" Ramirez asked. "Mr. Thorndyke claims that you offered him those funds for investment." "I'm absolutely sure," I replied firmly. "I would never trust Lloyd with that amount of money. He has no investment experience, and he has never demonstrated financial responsibility." The officers recorded my statement and took pictures of the safe and the room. Before leaving, Baker asked, "Mrs. Irving, have you made up your mind about pressing charges yet?" I sighed. "Not yet. I'll need some time." "Sure." He handed me a business card. "Call me anytime you're ready." After they left, the house fell silent again. I could feel the fatigue building up, not just physically, from the illness, but emotionally as well. This whole affair was draining the last of my strength, which wasn't much left. That evening, Sheriff Daniels called. "Mrs. Irving, we've got a new twist in the case. Mr. and Mrs. Thorndyke now claim that you planted the counterfeit money yourself, knowing they would take it." I almost laughed. "Really? And why would I do that?" "According to them, to frame them. They claim you're mentally unstable and turning against them." Doubt sounded in the sheriff's voice. "Of course we're skeptical of those claims, but we have to check all leads." "I understand," I replied calmly. "Well, it's easy to disprove. I have an account at the First National Bank of Salina, where I transferred most of my savings the week before their visit. A statement from the account will confirm that the real money is there and wasn't switched with counterfeit money." "That's very useful information, Mrs. Irving. With your permission, we'll request those statements." "Of course we will. I'll have the bank get you all the information you need." After the sheriff's call, I sat there for a long time thinking. Madison and Lloyd were desperate to get out of it, accusing me of all the deadly sins. They had no idea how thoroughly I had prepared. The next morning, I called the bank and authorized the release of my account information to the police. Then I contacted Eleanor. "Blythe, have you heard the news?" she asked excitedly. "The whole town is talking about it. Madison and Lloyd have been arrested for stealing and counterfeiting money. Small town, news spreads faster than wildfire." "Yeah, I know," I said tiredly. "You okay? Do you need anything?" I wondered. I needed a lot of things. More time, less pain, a daughter who would love me for what I was, not for my money. But Eleanor couldn't give me any of those things. "Thank you, Ellie, but I can handle it." "Blythe," her voice became serious, "I know you're not the type to ask for help, but at least let me drive you to Wichita if you decide to visit them." I hadn't planned on going, but the offer got me thinking. Maybe I really should have looked them in the eye. Say something I never said? "Thank you, Ellie. I'll think about it." A day later, Sheriff Daniels called again. "Mrs. Irving, your information checks out. Bank statements show that you transferred a large sum of money to a new account the week before the incident. That completely disproves Mr. and Mrs. Thorndyke's story." "I'm glad that's cleared up. I also have some information that may be of interest to you. Forensics has determined that the counterfeit bills were made using professional artwork materials, and each one has a mark visible under ultraviolet light." I froze. My tags. Of course they found them. "What mark?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound natural. "Property of Blythe Irving, not real money," the sheriff answered. "Mrs. Irving, can you explain that?" The moment of truth had arrived. I could continue to pretend, or I could tell the truth. After a moment's hesitation, I chose the latter. "Yes, Sheriff, I can explain. I made those fakes myself and substituted them for the real money in the safe." Pause on the other end of the line. "You, made them yourself?" There was genuine surprise in his voice. "I did. My late husband worked in a print shop and taught me the art. I suspected Madison and Lloyd would try to steal my money, so I thought I'd prepare myself. But why, Mrs. Irving? Why not just put all the money in the bank? Because I wanted them to make their choice, I answered quietly. And they did. There was a long silence then. Mrs. Irving, I need to be honest with you. What you did is in itself a violation of the law. Making fake money signs, even if they weren't intended to defraud. I understand, Sheriff, I interrupted him, and I'm willing to take responsibility. But before you make a decision, I'd like to talk to Madison and Lloyd. In person. That can be arranged, he replied after a short pause. When would you like to come? Tomorrow, if possible. I don't have much time. The next day, Eleanor, true to her word, drove me to Wichito. All the way she tried to talk me out of it. Blythe, think it over. Why would you do this? They betrayed you, tried to steal your money, and now they're accusing you of all the deadly sins. That's why I have to talk to them, Ellie, I said, staring out at the fields. We need to set the record straight. Sheriff Daniels, a tall, middle-aged man with tired eyes, met us at the Wichita police station. He escorted me to the visitor's room. Mr. and Mrs. Thorndyke are waiting for you, he said. I can be present for the conversation if you'd like. No, thank you. I would prefer to speak to them alone. He nodded. As you wish, but keep in mind that the conversation will be recorded for the record. Madison and Lloyd sat at the table, both looking exhausted and embittered. Lloyd jumped up when I arrived. You, he exclaimed. This is all your fault. Lloyd, I nodded at him, keeping my composure. Madison. My daughter looked at me with undisguised hatred. Why are you here? To admire your work? I sat across from them. No, I came to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Madison snapped at me. You set us up. You planted the fake money and reported it to the police when we took it. Why did you take it, Madison? I asked quietly. It was my money. It wasn't yours. You were going to leave it to us anyway, Lloyd blurted out. We just expedited the process. Expedited? I shook my head. You broke into my house, found a safe I never showed you, and took $875,000. That's called stealing, Lloyd. It's called taking care of an inheritance, he objected. You're getting more and more absent-minded. You could have lost the money or given it to somebody, like the library or an animal shelter. I gave him a hard look. What's wrong with that? It's our money, Madison blurted out. You've been saving it your whole life, and we have the right to— To what, Madison? I interrupted her. What exactly are you entitled to? She was silent, her lips pressed together. I'll tell you what you're entitled to, I continued. My disappointment. My regret that I must have made some terrible mistake in raising you to grow up to be a man capable of stealing from your own mother. Don't you dare accuse me, Madison flared up. You've always been cold and calculating. You've always cared about money, never about me. That's not true, I shook my head. I cared about you more than anything, and all that money, I saved it for you, so that you could have the security, the opportunities that I didn't have. If you cared so much, why did you refuse to help us when we asked you to? Lloyd intervened. Why did you keep all the money to yourself like Scrooge McDuck? Because you never asked for anything worthwhile, Lloyd, I replied calmly. New cars, expensive jewelry, vacations in the Bahamas. That's not what I've worked my whole life for. Then what have you worked for? Madison asked bitterly. So that the money would just sit there dead weight? I took a deep breath. It was time for the big news. Madison, Lloyd, I have a few months to live. I have terminal pancreatic cancer. They froze, staring at me in disbelief. What? Madison whispered. You're dying? Yes, I answered simply. I found out 2 weeks before you arrived. I decided not to tell you because I wanted to see what you'd do without the pressure of that information. And we failed the test, Lloyd muttered. It wasn't a test, I countered. It was life, real life, where you made real choices. Madison looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. But I knew my daughter too well to believe they were sincere. Mom, she began in a shaky voice, if only we knew. What, Madison? I interrupted her. You wouldn't have stolen the money? Would you have waited a few months until I died a natural death? She looked away, and that was more eloquent than anything I could say. You set us up, Lloyd said quietly. You knew we'd take the money, so you set a trap. Yes, I agreed, because I wanted to know the truth, and now I do. And now what? Madison asked. Are you going to press charges? You're going to send your own daughter to prison, knowing that you only have a few months left? This is manipulation at its finest, trying to use my illness against me. I haven't decided yet, I said honestly, but I want you to know that I've changed my will. All my money will go to a fund to support young artists and printers in Orville Irving's name. Madison's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. I'm your only daughter. I can and I did, I replied calmly. The law is on my side. My money is my decision. Money, always just money. Madison screamed. You love them more than you love me. No, Madison, I shook my head. You love money more than you love me. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. There was silence. Lloyd stared at the floor, and Madison glared at me hatefully. You know, she said finally, maybe it's for the best that you're going to die soon. At least we won't have to put up with your manipulation and judgment anymore. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Not that I expected remorse, but such blatant cruelty. Madison, Lloyd snapped at her, showing something like a conscience for the first time. What? She snapped. I'm just telling the truth. She's been controlling me with money my whole life, and now she's set this trap. And you're still defending her? I got up slowly. I said everything I wanted to say. Goodbye. Mom, wait. Madison jumped up. You can't just leave. What's going to happen to us? That's not my concern anymore, I said, looking her straight in the eye. You're adults. You made your own choices. Now live with the consequences. As I left the room, I heard Madison yell after me, but I didn't look back. Sheriff Daniels was waiting for me in the hallway. Mrs. Irving. He looked at me sympathetically. Are you all right? No, I answered honestly. But I will be. Have you made the decision to press charges? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to punish them to the fullest extent of the law. But the other part, the part that remembered Madison as a little girl with pigtails, couldn't. I won't press charges for theft, I said finally. But as far as charges of counterfeiting money, that's out of my jurisdiction, isn't it? That's right, the sheriff nodded. That's a federal offense, but your decision not to press the theft charge will be honored by the court. As for my own offense of making fakes, I continued, I'm willing to be held accountable. The sheriff gave me a long look. Mrs. Irving, all things considered, I doubt the prosecutor's office will prosecute you, especially as you said yourself. I don't have much time, I finished for him. Yes, that's true. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. Don't be. I smiled weakly. We're all gonna die someday. It's just a question of how we live out our time. In the car, Eleanor silently handed me a handkerchief, and it was only then that I realized I was crying. How did it go? She asked gently. Not good, I answered, wiping away my tears. But necessary. Did they at least apologize? I shook my head. Madison said it was for the best, that I was going to die soon. Eleanor gasped. Blythe, that's terrible. How could she? Easy, I sighed. She's long gone from being the person I'd hoped to raise. We drove in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. The familiar Kansas scenery floated by outside the window, the endless fields, the forests, the small farms, the land I'd lived on all my life. You know, I finally said, all this time I thought the most important thing was to make Madison financially secure, to give her what I didn't have growing up. But I guess I forgot to give her something more important. It's not your fault, Blythe, Eleanor said softly. You were doing the best you could. Maybe, I looked out the window, but it's too late to fix it now. The only thing left to do is to let go. And in that moment, I felt myself letting go, not just of Madison and Lloyd, but of resentment, of disappointment, of unfulfilled hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy chains that had been binding me were finally loosened. I knew that Madison and Lloyd would probably escape serious punishment. My fakes were of enough quality to fool them, but not enough to be considered real fakes. At worst, they'd get probation and fines. But it wasn't about the penalties. The point was that now I knew exactly who they were, and I didn't waste any more energy on self-deception. As I drove up to Salina, I made a final decision. I would spend the rest of my time the way I'd always wanted to, but never allowed myself to, without looking back at Madison, without guilt or obligation to an ungrateful family. Ellie, I said as we drove into town, do you think it's too late to take a trip at my age? The office of Richard Kellerman, my lawyer of 30 years, smelled of leather, paper, and light cologne. Richard hadn't changed much over the years, except for the graying of his hair and a few wrinkles. He greeted me with the same calm smile he'd always had. Blythe, he shook my hand. It's good to see you, though the circumstances could have been better. Thanks for agreeing to meet on such short notice, Richard. We sat down at his massive oak desk, and I outlined my situation, my diagnosis, my life expectancy, the incident with Madison and Lloyd. Richard listened without interrupting, making only brief notes in his notebook. So, he said when I'd finished, you want to change the will? Yes, I want to disinherit Madison and Lloyd, completely. Richard nodded, showing no surprise. That's your right, Blythe, but you must realize they may try to contest the will after your death. Given your diagnosis and recent events, they may argue that you were incapacitated or acting under the influence. That's why I came to you, I replied. I want to make everything as legally flawless as possible. He tapped his pen on the table thoughtfully. We can get an independent psychiatrist to examine your capacity and notarize your testimony as to why you changed your will. It'll make it very difficult for anyone to challenge the document. Oh, that's great. Let's do that. And who do you want to leave your estate to? I pulled a folder of prepared documents out of my bag. I want to establish the Orville Irving Charitable Foundation to support young artists and printers. Here's a sample charter for the foundation and a list of the trustees I'd like to have on the board. Richard ran his eyes over the documents. Very detailed. How long have you been planning this? Ever since I found out about the diagnosis, I answered. I needed something to keep my mind occupied. He nodded. What about the house and personal belongings? Sell the house, put the money in a trust. I'd like to leave a few personal items to Eleanor Foster. The list is attached. Richard made a note. What about Madison? Maybe at least some personal items, pictures? I've been thinking. Despite everything that had happened, cutting my daughter out of my life completely seemed wrong. Okay, family photo albums and her grandmother's earrings, which she'd always loved. Reasonable, Richard nodded. It might mitigate things a bit in a possible challenge. But not a dime of the money, I added firmly. I see, he set the pen aside. Blythe, I won't pretend to know what you're going through right now, but as your friend and lawyer, let me ask you this. Are you sure this is what you want? A complete breakup with your daughter? I sighed, looking out the window at the busy street of Salena. The breakup has already happened, Richard, and I didn't initiate it. I'm simply formalizing what has already happened, in fact. He nodded. Fair enough. I'll have the paperwork ready by the end of the week. In the meantime, he looked at me carefully. What are you planning to do? I'm going on a trip. I smiled, and it was a genuine smile. The one Orville and I had always put off. Where to, if it's no secret? Europe. I'll start in London, then Paris, Rome, Athens. Maybe I'll get to Japan. Orville always wanted to see the cherry blossoms. Richard smiled. That sounds wonderful. E. I'm sorry for the indelicate question, but are you sure your health will allow it? No, I answered honestly. I'm not, but that's no reason to sit at home and wait for the end. If I get really bad, I can always come back. Or stay wherever you like, Richard said gently. In a good clinic, with a view of the sea? I nodded. We both knew what we were talking about. The possibility of dying not in Salina, not among memories and regrets, but in a new place, looking at something beautiful. Yes, that's a possibility too. We discussed a few more legal details, and I left Richard's office with a sense of accomplishment. One important task had been accomplished. I spent the next few days preparing for my trip. I ordered tickets, booked hotels, made a list of places I wanted to visit. I didn't have as much energy as I would have liked, but I tried to use it wisely. Eleanor helped me with my preparations while trying to talk me out of it. Blythe, are you sure you're up to this? It's such a long flight, the jet lag. Ellie, I took her hand. If not now, when? In 3 months, I may not be able to walk unaided. She squeezed my hand in return. I'm just worried about you. I know, and I appreciate it, but I have to try. That evening, as I was unpacking, I came across an old photograph of Orville and me on the shore of Lake Canapachi, young, happy, with our whole lives ahead of us. Remember how we dreamed of seeing the Eiffel Tower? I whispered, looking at his smiling face. I'm finally gonna do it, Orvie. It's just a pity I'll do it without you. 2 days before I left, the phone rang. Madison. I hesitated to answer it, but then I picked it up. Mom. Her voice sounded unnaturally soft. How are you? I'm fine, Madison. To what do I owe the call? Yeah. She hesitated. I wanted to apologize. What I said at the station. It was awful. I didn't mean it. I didn't say anything. The apology sounded fake, like a memorized text. Mom, please, say something, she said, a piteous note in her voice. What do you want me to say, Madison? That everything's okay? That I forgive you and Lloyd? Yes, I mean, we made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we're your family, the only family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Madison, I said quietly. I know, Mom, I know, but we can fix this. We can start over, especially now that, when I'm dying, I finished for her. Pause. That's not what I was gonna say. No, that's exactly what I meant. And you know what, Madison? I'm glad it worked out this way. At least now I know exactly where we stand in relation to each other. Mom, don't say that. There was desperation in her voice. We can fix this. Lloyd and I have been through a lot because of this case. We've been released on our own recognizance, but the case isn't over yet. We could lose our jobs, our reputations. Oh, that's it. Not remorse, fear of repercussions. What do you want from me, Madison? I asked you straight out. Help us, she said. Tell the police it was a misunderstanding, that you gave us the money. Or, or that it was a joke. A joke, I repeated in a colorless voice. 875,000 counterfeit dollars as a joke. Well, not exactly a joke, but an experiment. You wanted to test us, and we failed the test, but now we've realized everything. What did you realize? That we can't take your money without permission, she exclaimed, like a child repeating a lesson she'd learned. And with permission? I couldn't hold back the sarcasm. Mom, please, she was almost crying now. We're in a desperate situation. If we're found guilty. You are guilty, Madison, I said calmly, and you have to take responsibility for your actions. But you're our mother, she was screaming now. You're supposed to protect us. I've protected you for 30 years, Madison. I fed you. I clothed you. I put you through college. I helped you put a down payment on a house. And in return, you and Lloyd stole from me when you thought I was too weak to defend myself. That's not true, she objected, but without much conviction. Yes, it is, I sighed. Listen, Madison, I won't press theft charges against you. I already reported it to Sheriff Daniels, but I'm not going to help you get out of it either. So, you're just leaving us? I could hear the disbelief in her voice. No, Madison, you abandoned me the moment you decided my money was more important than my dignity. I hung up the phone, feeling strangely calm. No anger, no bitterness, just clarity and determination. The phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was Lloyd. Blythe, he began without preamble. We need to talk. I just talked to Madison, I answered, and I have nothing more to add. Look, he said, his voice hard. I understand that you're upset, but think about the consequences. If we're convicted, the family's reputation will be ruined. It will affect you as well. I won't be around to worry about reputations, Lloyd, I said dryly. But think of Madison, your grandson. How will Albert live knowing that his parents were convicted of counterfeiting money? The mention of a grandson was a low blow. I'd only seen Albert a few times in his life. Madison and Lloyd had effectively cut me off from him, coming only when they needed money. Albert is a big boy now, Lloyd. He'll get over it. You can't be so heartless. He was almost shouting now. After all we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Lloyd? I asked with genuine curiosity. A pause. We visited you, took care of you, visited you when you needed money, cared to make sure your inheritance was safe. That's not fair, he resented it. We did care about your well-being. So much so that we decided to steal all my savings when we thought I was getting too old and weak to manage them on my own. It was a mistake. There was desperation in his voice now. We admit it. We repent. What else can we do? Nothing, Lloyd, I answered calmly. There's nothing you can do. What happened can't be undone with apologies or promises. But we're family, was his final argument, spoken almost pleadingly. No, Lloyd, we're not family. We're just people bound by a common last name and mutual obligations. But those obligations were broken when you decided that my money belonged to you more than to me. After that conversation, I expected them to come in person, a last desperate attempt. And I was not mistaken. The next day, at noon sharp, their silver sedan pulled up in front of my house. I met them on the veranda, sitting in a rocking chair with a book in my hands. They looked exhausted and stressed, Madison pale, with circles under her eyes, Lloyd with a nervous tick on his face. Mom, Madison began, stepping up onto the porch. We're here to talk. Have a seat. I pointed to the wicker chairs across the hall. Would you like some tea? They looked at each other, clearly confused by my calmness. No, thank you, Lloyd said. We wanted to discuss the situation in person. What kind of situation? I asked, laying down a page in my book. Mom, Madison leaned forward. We know what we did was terrible. We're not making excuses. But can't you find it in your heart to forgive? Especially now when I only have a few months to live? I finished it for her. Madison, being sick doesn't change what happened between us. It just makes more obvious what I should have seen a long time ago. And what is that? She asked defiantly. That our relationship has long been built not on love, but on expectations and obligations. You expect money and support from me. I expect respect and care from you. But neither of those things really exist. That's not true, Madison exclaimed. I love you, Mom. Maybe, I nodded. In my own way, but not enough to respect my decisions and my independence. Blythe, Lloyd interjected, we're not just here for the trial. We really want reconciliation. We want to be close to you in the last few months. Why? I asked bluntly. They looked at each other again. What do you mean, why? Madison frowned. You're our mother. We want to spend time with you. Interesting, I said. In the 16 years since Orville died, you've never expressed that desire. And now, all of a sudden, you want to spend time with me. Mom, that's not fair, Madison said, starting to get angry. We had our own lives, our own jobs, our own children. Of course, I agreed. And now you have a life too, which unfortunately doesn't include me. It does, she insisted. We're here, aren't we? You're here because you found out about my illness and you think you can still get something. If not money now, at least an inheritance later. Madison jumped up. How can you say that? Do you think we only came here for the money? Didn't we? I looked at her calmly. No, she was almost yelling. We came because you're dying, damn it, because despite everything, you're my mother. I sighed. Madison, please sit down and hear me out. She reluctantly sank back into the chair. I've changed my will, I said bluntly. My entire estate is going to your father's charitable foundation. You and Lloyd will get nothing but family albums and your grandmother's earrings. There was silence. Madison's face turned stone, and Lloyd turned pale. You can't, Madison finally said. I'm your daughter. I'm your flesh and blood. I can, I replied calmly. And I did. The will is legally perfect, with medical certification of my capacity and a detailed explanation of the reasons for my decision. We'll contest it, Lloyd said immediately. We have every reason to believe that you acted under the influence of illness and emotional stress. You can try, I shrugged, but Richard Kellerman had considered that option. At the mention of my lawyer's name, Lloyd cringed. Richard was known as one of the best lawyers around, especially in probate matters. Mom, Madison was crying for real now. How can you do this to us, after everything we've been through? That's why, Madison, exactly because of what we've been through. I slowly rose from my chair. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to finish packing. My plane leaves tomorrow morning. Plane? Lloyd asked in surprise. Where to? London, I replied, and from there to Paris, Rome, Athens. I'm finally going on that trip Orville and I have always dreamed of. In your condition? Madison exclaimed. This is crazy. No, I shook my head. It's crazy to spend the last months of your life clinging to the past and regretting a future that won't exist. I'm choosing a different path. What are we going to do? Madison asked bitterly. Just accept that our mother is leaving us and going to die in a foreign country? You can do whatever you want, I replied. So can I. I turned to go into the house, but Madison grabbed my arm. Mom, please. There was desperation in her eyes. Give us another chance. We can fix this. I gently released my hand. Sometimes, Madison, some things can't be fixed. You can only accept them and move on. But you're my mother, she whispered. You can't just walk away. I looked at her for a long moment. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, my flesh and blood. And part of me still loved her, not the woman she'd become, but the little girl I'd once rocked in my arms. You know, Madison, I said quietly, I never stopped loving you, but sometimes love means setting boundaries, even if it hurts. I left them on the veranda and walked into the house, feeling strangely light. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting out of a sense of duty or obligation, but out of a true understanding of what I needed. Through the window, I watched them sit in silence for a while, then get up and walk to the car. Lloyd was saying something fervently, waving his arms, and Madison was nodding, wiping away tears. I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. They were probably already planning how to contest the will, or how else to get something from me. But it didn't matter anymore. In the evening, Eleanor came to help with the final preparations. They were coming, she said, helping me put things away. I saw their car. Yes, I confirmed. One last try. And how did it go? As expected. First the pleading, then the threats, then the tears. Eleanor shook her head. I'd never understood Madison. Even when she was a child, there was something calculating. Maybe it's my fault, I sighed. Orville and I talked too much about money, about security. Maybe she'd grown up believing that the material was more important than the spiritual. Don't blame yourself, Blythe. Eleanor squeezed my hand. We all do what we can, and children grow up to be what they grow up to be. I smiled gratefully. You know, Ellie, I'm going to miss our conversations. Me too. She wiped away a tear. But you promised to write and send postcards from every city. I will, I hugged her. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll be able to come visit me, at least for a week. I'd like that, she smiled through her tears. I've always wanted to see Paris. After Eleanor left, I spent the last evening in my house, walking slowly around the rooms, saying goodbye to every corner, every memory. This was where I had lived most of my life, where I had raised my daughter, where I had loved and been loved. But despite the nostalgia, I felt no regret. Home is just a place. True home is what you carry in your heart. In the morning, a cab picked me up to take me to the Kansas City airport. I took one last look at the house, mentally saying goodbye to it and everything it symbolized. The past, the obligations, the weight of unfulfilled expectations. There was a new chapter ahead of me, a short one, but it was all mine, and I was going to live it on my own terms, free of toxic relationships and false commitments. Where are we going, ma'am? The driver asked, loading my suitcases into the trunk. To the airport, I replied with a smile. I'm going on a trip.